The elevator door opened and there was someone. A woman with her back turned about 3 meters from the elevator. The hallway was very dark, as if there were no lights on that floor, but I could make out her silhouette. She had long hair, completely gray, and it hung as if it were wet or very heavy. Her hands were slightly outstretched at her sides. She didn't move at all, she wasn't breathing, and she had no reason to be in an empty building. Good evening, everyone. It's great to have you here once again. I hope you're all calm and in a good mood. And if that's not the case, then I hope what you're about to hear helps you switch off for a little while. Sometimes fear is the best way to relax for a while, as ironic as that may sound. Tonight we bring you stories that are very different from each other, ranging from haunted highways to empty apartments inhabited only by ghosts. But each one is unsettling in its own way, so I'm sure this episode will linger with you for a good while after you've finished it. So please get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let yourself be enveloped by what's coming. This is Relatos de la Noche. Hey everyone. This happened to me a few months ago when I was looking for an apartment downtown. The truth is, I was desperate because everything was so expensive. Then I found one that looked great in the photos. Recently remodeled, spacious, and at a price that was too good to be true, considering where it was and how close it was to my job. You probably got suspicious right there, but when you're urgently looking for something, sometimes you get carried away and miss the details. The red flags. The street where the building was located was strange. Not empty, but kind of lifeless. There were no open stores, no people passing by, no noise. Everything was dark. It seemed like a block no one used anymore. Even so, there was the woman from the real estate agency waiting for me at the entrance. I wasn't wrong. From the start, I noticed she was nervous. And not nervous like someone who's shy or in a hurry. She was restless. She kept looking inside the building while also glancing at the street. It seemed she didn't want to be alone with me, but also didn't want to go inside. She quickly took my hand and said, "Let's go, it's on the 5th floor." I tried to make a joke to help her relax, but she didn't go along with it. She didn't even smile. The only thing she said was something like, "Look, I'll show you quickly because I have other appointments right after this." And that's how we entered the building. The lobby was completely dark, except for a yellowish light coming from an old bulb. The walls were damp, and even though the ad said recently remodeled, it was clear that only applied to the apartment. The building looked abandoned. You couldn't hear anything. No TV, no voices, no footsteps. Nothing. We went up the stairs because he told me he didn't trust the elevator. By the 5th floor, I was already sweating as if I'd been running. He showed me the apartment in under 3 minutes. I'm not exaggerating. He opened the door, pointed out the kitchen, and quickly showed me the bathroom. As I was about to ask about the contract, he interrupted, saying the other interested person was about to arrive. "If you like it, message me today, but you have to go downstairs." Then he said something that seemed strange to me. She repeated to me several times that when I left, please leave the building door open, not to close it, so she wouldn't have to come down for the next person. But the tone sounded like they just wanted me gone, that's all. Someone unwilling to come downstairs. She said she was staying there. Honestly, after I closed the door, I considered leaving by the elevator. I was really tired and wanted to see if it would work. I wasn't planning to rent that place and go up 5 floors every day. When I was leaving, he just repeated to me not to stop on any floor, to go straight down to the bottom. And that's when I felt kind of weird, like he was giving me instructions so I wouldn't run into someone. I entered the elevator and the door didn't close fully, leaving a 2-centimeter gap through which you could see the wall. Inside, the elevator was shaking as if the structure was loose, and it was one of those that takes a while to respond when you press a button. It started going down. It was really slow. Between the 4th and 3rd floors, I heard someone press the button from below. The elevator stopped. The door opened, and there was someone there. A woman with her back turned, about 3 meters from the elevator. The hallway was very dimly lit, but I could make out her silhouette. She had long hair, completely gray, and it hung as if it were wet or very heavy. Her hands were slightly stretched out to the sides like someone does when welcoming you. She wasn't moving at all. She looked like a statue that wasn't breathing. Even if she moved, you couldn't notice it. I said goodnight, but she didn't react. I pressed the close button, but it was slow. It felt like 20 seconds passed, and it still didn't close. Obviously, it was less time. Through the crack, I saw his silhouette unchanged.
Ni un milímetro de movimiento.
The elevator continued down, and on the 2nd floor the bell rang again, signaling it was called. It stopped again. It opened. It was her again. In the same position, at the same angle, at the same distance. If I hadn't seen us going down, if the elevator door hadn't stayed slightly open, I would have sworn we were on the same floor, but that wasn't true. This time his body was turning a little, as if he wanted to turn toward me. It was just a slight movement, but enough for me to notice that he had moved. She couldn't have come down the stairs that fast. Not without making noise. Not in time to catch the elevator. I said nothing. I didn't even breathe. I just started pressing the button to close. I didn't want her to hear me or think I wanted to get closer. I didn't even know why, but that's how I felt. As if hearing me were dangerous for her. The door took a long, long time. The woman was still there, barely leaning in, with half her body turned toward me. Finally, it closed and the elevator kept going down. I expected it to go to the ground floor, but it didn't. Before that, the bell rang again. Someone had called from the 1st floor. When the door opened, I didn't see anything, literally nothing. That floor was completely dark. There was no light, no point of reference, no reflection. It was a black canvas, a void. And then I heard something. Footsteps. Not quick footsteps, very slow footsteps. Like someone walking, dragging their feet a little. They came from the end of the hallway I couldn't see. Each step sounded closer. I tried to close the door, but the elevator wouldn't respond. I kept pressing it, but nothing happened. It seemed stuck. And the footsteps kept getting closer, slowly, steadily, without stopping. I was already breathing hard without meaning to. My back was soaked. When the footsteps sounded so close that they seemed to be right in front of the elevator, that's when the door finally closed. When I reached the ground floor, I left without looking back. I ran. I don't even know if the elevator finished opening before I was already jumping out. At the entrance, I saw a guy knocking on the building's door, as confused as I was. Another young man was next to him. And by the way he was dressed, for a second I thought he was jumping him. But no, apparently he was a neighbor. He told her not to sign anything, that it wasn't a good place to be, that nobody lived there. No one had been able to live there in a long time. The guy who was clearly there to see the apartment, like me, heard it too, but still went in. He probably thought I was crazy or exaggerating. I would have thought the same thing exactly 10 minutes ago. I tried to stop him but couldn't speak. My legs felt weak and I couldn't come up with the words to explain. I went out and went straight to look for a taxi, but no, not there. I had to call it. From that other street. No. I don't know what happened to him, and I also don't know what it was that I saw. Sometimes I remember that moment like it was a dream. During the whole visit, as if it hadn't been completely real. I'm still searching for an apartment there. It would be a dream to be able to walk to work. But I promise you, if I see another ad that's too cheap to be true, I really wouldn't go see it this time. Hello everyone. This happened about 25 years ago when I was a child and lived in a quiet neighborhood in León, Guanajuato. It was the kind of neighborhood where few cars passed, so you could still play soccer or hide and seek outside without anyone bothering you. Especially on the street behind mine, the last one in the neighborhood, so far from everything that the back part was still just dirt. My parents watched from the window, and as long as we stayed on the block, it was fine. Most afternoons, the same group met, 2 neighbors from across the street, my cousins a few houses down, and me. Sometimes more kids would join us, but that particular day it was just us, the usual group. I remember we were playing later than usual. It was already getting dark, and the neighborhood lighting wasn't good, so everything looked kind of dim. At the end of the street, there was a vacant lot. It was an area with no houses, just dirt, some bushes, and a path that led to the highway. We were curious, but they still wouldn't let us in. They said it was dangerous, so we always played on the other side. Even so, that night we were a little closer to that area because we started looking for a ball that had rolled away from us. I was bending down to pick it up when I saw someone walking down the street. It was a girl I had never seen before in the neighborhood. When she saw us, she hid behind a car as if she was afraid to come closer. We stayed still. One of my cousins said she was probably lost, another said we should just go inside. But I got a little worried because she looked really small, about our age or maybe a bit older, but it was really strange for her to be outside at that hour. I remember I asked her if she was okay, and that's when she came out from behind the post. From that moment, I sensed something was off. It was very clear. Look, I wasn't the brightest kid, but I knew his clothes weren't normal. He wore a simple, very old dress like one of those school uniforms people hardly wore anymore. He had no backpack, sweater, or anything suggesting he came from a nearby house. Her shoes were too big for her and they were clean, but the dress looked worn out, as if it had been waiting for a long time. I don't know, I remember because back then all the girls wore very different clothes and I can't forget that. The second thing we noticed was her face, not because it looked hurt or anything dramatic, but because she didn't show any expression. She wasn't smiling, she didn't look scared or anything. She was just staring at us. And when she spoke, that's when honestly we got scared. And the thing is, her voice wasn't that of a little girl. It's a voice that's very hard to describe. It sounded very thin, but like an adult's. Like a woman was trying to talk like a little girl and couldn't. As if the voice was coming from very deep inside, from a place that didn't match the body we had in front of us. And she asked us, "Where's the highway? Where?" Just like that, without context, without warning, without saying she was lost. "Where's the highway?" I pointed toward the vacant lot and told her that if she kept going straight that way, she would find it. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't thank us. She didn't say anything. She just started walking in that direction, slowly, as if she didn't know how to move her feet properly, as if she were copying someone else's way of walking. We watched her leave until she vanished among the dry trees. We went inside, and I remember that when I got home, my parents asked me why I looked so pale. I told them what we saw, and they said it was likely a local girl who had just arrived. And that was it. At least that night. Because the creepy part comes later, the next day, very early, when the neighbors started talking. The gossip. They said a girl escaped from a church a few blocks away. They kept her there because she was possessed. They brought her from a village and kept her there. They were waiting for priests from Rome to review her case. And it wasn't her first escape attempt. Each version from each neighbor had different details, but they all agreed that there was a girl in that church, and that there was something very wrong with her. The screams were audible outside. When I heard that, it really got to me. I didn't connect it right away, but little by little it started to make sense. The girl we saw the night before was heading toward the highway. She was kind of moving away from the neighborhood, as if she were trying to get as far away as possible from where the church was. For a long time after that, we stopped playing on that part of the street. Neither us nor the other kids, and not because our parents forbade it, but because every night, almost at the same time, just before nightfall, we would hear screams. But they weren't normal screams. They were really strange. They sounded both like a little girl and someone older, as if the voice shifted mid-scream. There were nights when an old woman would appear. Sometimes it seemed the voice came from far away, from a huge or empty room. And later on, when we talked about it, each of us remembered it differently. My cousin said it sounded like the girl was very close, like she was walking between the houses. Other neighbors said it seemed she went all the way to the empty lot. A lady swore she heard her upstairs, like an echo on the rooftops. I don't know. The only thing I know is that we all heard it. We all stopped playing in the street for months. After a while, the screams stopped. We stopped discussing it and forgot. The story became like one of those neighborhood rumors adults get tired of repeating, and that children try to forget. But I still remember the way the girl walked, the one we saw the night of the escape, and that voice that had nothing to do with how she looked. Thank you for making it to this point in the episode. I want to remind you that by subscribing to this show, you help us a lot, and you'll never miss a new episode. I encourage you to be part of the best community on the internet. Before we continue, I want to apologize for the sound in the live episode, the one about the spirits of the Indios Verdes subway. It starts with a clip from our participation. During Amazon Music's podcast week, honestly, live it didn't sound good even though I was really sick. But there was a problem uploading it. It showed me that the music added by the people from Amazon was copyrighted. To avoid taking it down, I tried to replace that background sound with an option YouTube gave me. But unfortunately, that tool is still in testing. It didn't keep the background music at the same volume. And that's why, in several parts, it's louder than my voice. That was because of a mistake when using that tool. But remember that at minute 14, that fragment ends and a completely normal episode begins. So go listen to it because I feel like it had really good stories. And a lot of people left because they thought everything was going to be like that, live, and that everything was going to have the music error. So go and give it another chance, starting from minute 14. And if you haven't listened to it, well, look, you have a double episode for today. But it's time to continue. We continue with more stories of the night. Hello, everyone. This happened to me when I lived in Guadalajara. In the year 2015, I was in my 20s, working as a manager at a downtown coffee shop. Well, More than a coffee shop, it was a small bakery that sold really good coffee. It was one of those with a stone oven, very traditional. My shift started at 5 in the morning, which was when we turned on the ovens, so I had to leave my apartment at 4 o'clock every day. I lived in an old building, not very big, like those built in the 70s. It looked fine outside, but inside you noticed its age. Hallways with a lot of echo, light bulbs that burned out often, doors that didn't close properly. You also had to slam the door, things like that. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Right across from mine was apartment 313, although it always seemed strange to me, because on that floor there was a 301 and a 302. I asked once. They told me that's how the numbering was since it was built, but I never really understood why, because that skip only happened on that floor. It was as if 313 belonged to another building. The thing is, every dawn when I left for work, the same thing happened. I would close my door, and right at that moment, the door to 313 would crack open. Just a small crack, a few centimeters, just enough to notice it was opening, and nothing more. The first thing I noticed was a blue apron, one of those kitchen ones. Then the hand of an older lady, wrinkled but firm, resting on the edge of the door. And then her voice. "Good morning, young man. You're already going to work." Always the same phrase, at 4 o'clock sharp. I told him yes. I went early because I had to arrive before 5. She felt it, though I rarely saw her fully. Just the silhouette of her head, moving behind the door. And then she would tell me the same thing. "I don't sleep anymore. If you want, stop by for a coffee, just so you can take it with you." But she never opened it any further. She never showed her full face. I never got to see the inside. Just that slit, the darkness, the head silhouette, a small piece of blue tablecloth, and the smell of soap. A strong smell like freshly washed clothes, but mixed with something old, as if that scent had been trapped in a room closed off for a long time. I always thanked her and told her no, that I was in a hurry. I thought she was an old lady who lived alone and never slept. Honestly, I felt sorry for her. Still, I never accepted the coffee. I wasn't comfortable going into an apartment whose door I'd never fully opened. That lasted for months, exactly the same, until one morning it stopped being routine. Early morning routine that lasted for months, several times a week, exactly the same. Until one night when it was drizzling and colder than usual. I went out to the store, and for some reason, I looked at the door to apartment 313. I didn't know anything, but I don't know, I felt something. It seemed strange to me, and maybe I even felt a little relief that there was no one there at that moment, as if my body had been tense without me realizing it. But just when I was about to go down the stairs, there was a loud, sharp thud inside room 313, a strong, clear sound like something very heavy had fallen. I ran back, went up to the door, and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" Silence. I started knocking on the door, and everything inside felt completely still, as if nothing had happened. Not a normal nighttime silence, but as if nothing at all was happening inside, absolutely nothing. And it was very strange, because after that thud, there should have been some kind of reaction. I went downstairs and went straight to the doorman who was sleeping in a chair next to the entrance. And I said that I thought something had happened to the lady in 313. And he barely opened his eyes and said to me, irritated, "What lady?" "Well, the one in 313, the one who lives across from me." I told him, and the doorman stared at me as if I had said something foolish. "No one lives there." I laughed a little, thinking he didn't understand me, and I explained that they opened the door for me every morning before dawn so I could say goodbye. The thing about the coffee, the apron, the lady who peeked out, the coffee. And that's when his expression changed. He stood up suddenly and said to me, "Come with me. I'm going to show you something, but don't touch anything." We went upstairs. He took out a huge key and looked for a rusty key. When he opened apartment 313, he went in first, and the smell hit me immediately. It wasn't the same smell of soap or clean clothes, but a smell of dust. Dust shut away for years, old dampness, something kept too long. The apartment was completely in ruins, peeling walls, damp stains, closet without doors. The kitchen was a rusty shell. The window was broken and had thick cobwebs, the kind that don't seem like they're from months of neglect, but from years, even decades. There was no furniture, no chairs, no sign at all of what could have caused the noise I heard. I told the doorman that it was impossible, that I saw the lady almost every day, that we talked, that she offered me coffee, and that I had just heard a loud bang. I'm sure the doorman crossed himself and took me by the arm. "We shouldn't be here," he told me, "and you shouldn't see this." I insisted. I told him I didn't understand anything, that if he knew something, he should tell me, but he didn't say anything. While we were there, we left. He closed the door tightly, and only when we were going down the stairs. He turned to look at me and said, "You're not the first one." He stopped on the landing, and that's where he told me. He told me that years ago, in 2007 or 2008, a doctor lived in the same apartment I was living in. A young doctor with strange schedules. Sometimes she would also leave at dawn, around 4 a.m., just like me. And she had also heard a voice speaking to her from there, not a woman's voice, but that of an older man. A man who greeted her from behind the door of 313 without opening it. Through nothing more than a crack, he always said the same thing to her. "Good morning, miss. I don't sleep anymore, you know." And he would also offer her coffee to take with her when the doctor complained about it. They called maintenance and opened 313 to make sure no one had gotten in. It was just the same as before, abandoned, in ruins, without furniture, with no signs that anyone was hiding there. They even thought the doctor had imagined her, that it was because she hardly slept, or maybe she was taking something to get through her shifts. She left after a few weeks and never explained why. She just left the keys and moved out without picking up several things. The doorman asked me not to look at that door again when I left, not to answer if I heard anything, and not to accept anything. Not coffee, not a conversation, nothing. I stopped leaving at dawn. I changed my schedule. And a few months later, I left Guadalajara. I left that building. I can't tell you that I lived the rest of my time there in fear, because I didn't feel it during the day. But like I said, I didn't leave early anymore, knowing that at 4 a.m, if I opened my door, there could be a crack in the one across from me. A blue apron peeking out with a strong smell of soap and forgotten coming out of an abandoned apartment. I never knew who really lived in that apartment, and now it's just a memory, a very vivid memory, especially of that phrase that I can still hear. "I don't sleep anymore." This story didn't happen to me directly, but it's a story I've heard so many times since I was a child that I feel as if I had lived it myself. It's about my uncle, may he rest in peace. He was a truck driver for years and often drove the highway between Matehuala and Saltillo each month. And even though my uncle was never one to believe in strange things, what happened to him there left a mark on him forever. Even going back to church after many years, or so they tell me. He always found the road peaceful, especially compared to others that made him nervous, that made him feel unsafe. One night he began to notice something as he passed by. And it happened on several occasions at the same spot on a lonely stretch where there are no houses, no businesses, no ranches, nothing. Around there, he would see a woman standing by the side of the road, standing in the same spot, making the same gesture, with her thumb up, asking for a ride. My uncle never picked anyone up. He didn't like to. He said it was dangerous, that you never know who you're letting in. But he swore that the woman didn't look aggressive or anything, or strange. In fact, she looked more sad, like she wasn't from around there, like she barely knew where she was. He saw her like that for months. She was always there at night at the time he passed by, always standing with her arm outstretched, with her finger raised as if she were waiting for his truck in particular, or for some good Samaritan to give her a ride. And one night, he doesn't know why, my uncle decided to stop. He felt sorrier for her than usual, maybe. He wanted to help. He said he was calm that night. The load was on time. He wasn't sleepy. He had some old music playing that he really liked. And something in him said, "Poor lady, alone here again." And he stopped. As soon as he stopped, he regretted doing it. But it was already too late, and the woman didn't react when he braked. She didn't come closer, didn't lower her hand, she didn't move at all. She kept her arm outstretched as if she didn't see him coming from afar. My uncle got off the truck to talk to her, to tell her that if she wanted, he could give her a ride somewhere, take her to the next town. He didn't do it carelessly, he did it cautiously, of course, but he tried to speak kindly. And it was there, getting off the truck, when the first strange thing happened. His own shadow, my uncle's. It stretched way out along the road, a really long shadow, as if his body was 3 or 4 meters tall, as if the truck's headlights were on the ground, stretching his shadow forward. My uncle stopped for a second to look at it, to understand why it was being cast like that, but then he noticed something else. The woman had no shadow. Nothing. She didn't cast even a trace of a shadow on the asphalt. And, unfortunately, he had already moved far enough to be just a few steps away from her, almost face to face, and that's when the worst happened. He realized that the woman was moving her mouth, quickly, as if she were speaking very, very fast without looking at him, her gaze lost on the road, as if she were waiting for something. But he couldn't hear anything, nothing, as if her voice wasn't coming out, as if she were speaking underwater, or as if she were speaking in one room, and he was in another, completely different room. My uncle said he clearly saw her jaw moving, the way she pronounced words, the movement of her neck, her chin, her lips. But he didn't hear a single sound. That's when he felt something he had never felt before. He ran to the truck, jumped in, and took off without looking back, his heart racing, afraid to look in the mirrors, and even more afraid that the door would...
Piloto se le abriera.
He stepped on the gas. He didn't slow down for miles. He didn't want to think. He didn't want to explain anything to himself. Just drive. Get as far away as he could. When he finally got to Matehuala, he stopped at a gas station, and only then did the adrenaline start to wear off a little. Even though he tried to convince himself that he had imagined things, something didn't add up. What finally broke him was what he discovered afterward. On the way back during the day, as he passed through the same stretch, he carefully looked at the exact spot where he always saw the woman in the early mornings. But this time he looked across the road, and that's when his chest tightened. Because there were 2 crosses, those white metal ones they put up when someone dies in an accident. Old, rusty, as if they'd been there for years. He didn't like making up stories, so he decided to ask other truckers and people from the area if they knew about any accident around there, but no one could tell him anything specific. My uncle saw the woman 2 more times, always in the early hours, always in the same position and always without a shadow. But he never stopped again, nor did he slow down, and he looked away when he passed by her. Though he's gone, he can't retell the story. I want to do it. I want his story to live on for a long time. And I must tell you that that's a stretch of road that I have never driven at night. Rest well. Have a very good night, everyone.